So today is my turn to give a lecture. Before my lecture, I want to emphasize 2 points. Since we are preparing a workshop in Fudan University, I encourage all our students to form some different groups, okay? And then you can discuss together. The first one. And the second, we will welcome all professors and students from Yonsei and KO to Fudan campus. So please, teaching assistants in KO and Yonsei confirm the numbers of your delegation, okay, to Fudan campus. So then we can reserve the conference room and the restaurant for all of you. Okay. So today, I would like to give a lecture. The title is "The Logic of Political Reform in China from Comparative Perspective." Okay. I have already sent my PowerPoint slides and 2 papers to all of you, including 1 paper by myself, and another one by another scholars on Chinese politics, especially on the development of the local People's Congress. My lecture will focus on the main argument about the relation between economic development and the democratic transition in China, and try to explain and explore the logic of political reform and the political developments during the past decades in China. This year we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, and last year we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the reform and the opening up. That's been since we adopted this policy almost 40 years ago. So many people, many scholars discuss the so-called development miracle in China, discuss the rise of China almost everywhere. In these discussions, a very important part is that what is the secret of the development miracle in China, right? So how can we explain this rapid development in China? Usually, especially in the studies of the Chinese politics, many scholars tend to conclude that there's only some economic reform and rapid growth without any substantial progress in political reform and political development. So here I try to give you a new explanation about that. Okay. In the studies of the comparative politics, a very important topic is the relation between economic development and democracy. So usually we say development and democracy. Based on the research on this topic, we may find the 2 major competing theories in the literature. One is the so-called clash theory. Another is harmony theory. The clash theories tend to stress the conflict and the clash between economic development and democracy. I want to talk about this so-called cruel choice between development and democracy. So all the hard choice between development and democracy. Okay. Many scholars talk about these relations, and also in Asia, many political leaders tend to argue this crucial relations. Right? For example, a very famous scholar, Samuel Huntington, published a very famous book, Political Change in Political Order in Changing Societies. And also, he tend to discuss the different competing goals of the development in developing countries. Okay. And also, I know some scholars in East Asia. For example, a very famous professor, Fujiwara Kiichi. I hope the Japanese students know this big name, Fujiwara Kiichi, in Tokyo University, so on and so forth. In Asia, many political leaders tend to have such kind of the opinions on the relation between economic development and democracy. The famous one, for example, the former leader in South Korea, Park Chung-hee, and the former leader in Singapore, Lee Kuan-yew. Okay. When we discuss the relation between the economic development and democracy, the scholars mentions many different points. This means the tensions or the conflict between economic development and democracy. Now, for example, some people may say democracy tend to harm the efficiency. In a democracy, if we want to make a decision, it's usually in a long process. But in an authoritarian regime, we may make a decision very quickly. This is the so-called efficiency. Okay, and also we discuss the relation between democracy and governance, and also we discuss the relation between freedom and discipline. But later, I want to give you a quote by Lee Kuan-yew. Okay? Also, we just discuss the justice and efficiency, and the accumulation and the function. So, if we want to promote development, of course, we need more and more accumulation, the capital accumulation. If we consume and distribute more and more, we have any resources to promote the rapid growth. And also we discuss, for example, the decentralization and the centralization. So in a famous book, Political Order in Changing Society, Samuel Huntington analyzed this conflict, this tension between economic development and democracy. So Samuel Huntington emphasized the so-called order, political and social order. Order is first. Order. So no stability, nothing. So and in another very famous paper, Samuel Huntington analyzed the relation between economic development and democracy. So according to his analysis, if a less developed country is going to achieve high rate of economic growth, it will have to have a development-oriented authoritarian regime. Democratic governments will simply be too soft and unable to mobilize resources, curtail consumption, and promote investment so as to achieve a high rate. And Lee Kuan-yew, the former prime minister in Singapore, pointed out, I believe that what a country needs to develop is discipline more than democracy. Okay. The exuberance of democracy will inevitably lead to indiscipline and disorder, which have an adverse effect to economic development. Okay? In many East Asian countries, including China, so we emphasize the discipline and order. Deng Xiaoping said, if the people, especially the young students, went to the street and demonstrate every week, every day, every month, there's no order, no social and political stability, and then we cannot attract any investment, no substantial development, no rapid growth. So this is a very basic attitude, very basic opinion about the relation between development and democracy in East Asia, and also in the studies of the comparative politics. So based on this theory, this means based on this clash theory between the economic development and democracy, so many scholars think there has been no or little progress toward democracy in China, because the traditional Leninist party state system remains the same, and no fundamental achievements have been made in political reform and political development. So because the Chinese Communist Party have been persisting in the economic development as the central task, and take the development as the top priority. So many scholars, including China and in some other countries, for example in Japan and in the United States, they discuss the rapid growth, discuss the development miracle in China, but no one appreciates political development, especially the so-called democratic development in China. Now here I mentioned many big names. For example, the Wang Guixiu from the Central Party School, and the very famous scholar Hu Angang from Tsinghua University, and also another one, Min Xinpei. Min Xinpei, a leading scholar in the United States on Chinese politics. Okay, the Min Xinpei published a very famous book several years ago, in which he said, post-Mao political reform is at worst an oxymoron, and at best a series of the tentative, partial, and superficial measures, most likely to fail because they in no way challenge, limit, or undermine the Communist Party's political monopoly. So on and so forth. So that's means many scholars tend to argue on this cruel choice between economic development and democracy, and also tend to analyze the political and the economic development in China based on this clash theory. So unfortunately, in my research, I think this is not true. So I want to compare the development in China and other East Asian countries in the area. So in many other East Asian countries in the area, especially, for example, in Singapore, in South Korea, maybe they follow this development model. But in China, the situation is quite different. So here I try to introduce a lot of scholars who analyze the political development in China, and think there are more and more democratic development in China. Now, for example, a very famous scholar, Robert Scanapino, a really senior and leading scholar in the United States, study the East Asia, especially China. He tend to add some more elements in political development in China. So he tried to characterize the Chinese politics as an authoritarian pluralist system. And also some other scholars in Japan, for example, Mori Kazuko, Kokubun Ryosei, and Amako Satoshi, and some others. So they tend to add some new elements in their analysis of the Chinese politics. That means they find some new development during the post-decade in China. It's not the old system. Many substantial change took place in Chinese politics, in a political process in China. Okay? And also some other, for example, the Xiao Gongqing. And in my research, I think there's not this Asian style authoritarianism in China, and the political transition from authoritarianism to democracy in other East Asian countries and areas did not occur in China. That means I try to emphasize the differences between China and some other East Asian countries in the area. But especially the so-called classic development model in East Asia. China is quite different. Now here I try to analyze these major differences in detail. So I list many different points. For example, the historical experience is quite different. So, in South Korea and Singapore, now first they suffered the so-called indiscipline and disorder, and then they established an authoritarian regime promoting the economic development. Now, for example, in South Korea, during the 1950s and 50s, there were so many protests and demonstrations and political conflict, the political struggle, and no any substantial development. And then Park Chung-hee came to power and imposed a new military authoritarianism. And in Singapore, first during the 1950s, they suffered many the political instability. And then Lee Kuan Yew came to power and established his own authoritarian leadership. Quite different. But in China, from late 1970s, because we suffered the economic collapse and the political dictatorship of the Mao Zedong. So from the very beginning of the reform, we tried to promote economic development, and also we tried to develop democracy in China. So, in the very beginning, Deng Xiaoping emphasized again and again, we must place democratic development on our priority. So that means we introduced a lot of reform from the very beginning of China's reform. Okay. And second, for example, the functions of the representative organs are different. But this means the Congress. In China, we say the People's Congress. Okay? In South Korea, it's the National Assembly. And this is the representative organ. After the end of the Cultural Revolution and the death of Mao Zedong, we re-established China's political system. One of the key points is that we re-established the People's Congress system. And that's the People's Congress system played a very important role, a more and more important role in the political process in China. So I sent you a paper on this topic. Okay. And the third one, the relationship between the central and the local government are different. The China's reform begins with the decentralization. So, during the late 1970s and early 1980s, we introduced a lot of reform to decentralize, and then the local government played a more and more important role. Today, many scholars discuss the secret of the China's development miracle. Okay? One important explanation is that the local governments drive the China's development. Okay? So they use many different systems, many different concepts and theory. For example, physical, physical federalism. Anyone know that? The physical federalism. Okay? So on and so forth. That means the local governments were encouraged to invest more on the local development. So this is a very special institutional design. So all of this are based on the process of the decentralization in China. And the next one, the international environment is different. During the 1960s and 1970s, so in so many developing countries, the authoritarian regime will establish. But from the late 1970s, the international situation changed. So that means it's more and more difficult, but even it's impossible for China to establish the so-called authoritarian regime. Because we were facing a totally different international environment. Right? So I remember very, very clearly, during the 1980s, China tried to implement it, reform and open up, right? China tried to enter the GATT. Later it's called the WTO. China negotiates with many countries, for example, with the European countries, with the United States. In this process, almost all countries try to encourage China to make some progress towards democracy and the rule of law and protection of the human rights. Right? So that means from the early 1980s, so we faced a very different international environment. So we have to progress together with all other countries. Right? And in this development, that means China implemented a lot of reform and established a very special system, quite different from the other countries in East Asia. And then this special system created or led to many serious problems, quite different from the other countries in East Asia. For example, in China, the widening gap between rich and poor, between east and west, between north and south. Right? Just now I emphasized the role of the local governments, right? Since the local government played more and more important role, it's very understandable that the different areas develop at different speed. So this is a very serious problem in today's art. So you may find the so-called regional disparity in China. So I think this is a very, very natural result of the China's development strategy. Quite different. And then, during the Hu Jintao period, we tried to introduce some new reforms to balance this local and regional difference. So I try to give you some points on the new series. This is my point. I want to explain the true secret of the development miracle in China. Right? So of course, my argument is based on the harmony theory between the economic development and democracy. So it's not real harmony. Maybe it's just a compromise or reconciliation. So it's very difficult. It's impossible for us to reach the real harmonious situation. But we can try to make balance between these two different goals: the economic development and the democracy. Right? So the harmony theories maintain that the two goals of the economic development and democracy can be reconciled and achieved to some extent in the developing country. So many scholars, based on clash theories, think these two goals will have the fundamental conflict. And in many others, maybe we can maintain some kind of balance. Okay? Now here I introduce a very famous scholar, former professor in Tokyo University, my supervisor in Tokyo University, very famous professor, Ikuo Kabashima. So he studied in Harvard University. His supervisors including, for example, Samuel Huntington, Sergeant Weber, and Edward Reichel. Amazingly, during his year in Harvard University, he published a very, very famous research result in a really leading journal, the World Politics, so on the Japan's case study, and they introduced a very important concept to explain the post-war development in China, in Japan. So and this key concept is the supportive participation. Many scholars argue the cruel relation between democracy and development because they think the participation is harmful. But in Japan, based on his analysis, based on his field study, he thinks the participation may be supportive to the development. So this the cornerstone in his theory. Right? And at the same time, many other scholars, for example, the Golden White, the James Menno, try to give us some points in this similar or same direction. This means try to develop some theory about the so-called developmental democracy. That means try to make the compromise between these two different goals: economic development and democracy. Right? And if you want to know some details about this supportive participation, you may find a very important book, the first in Japanese, and now I translated it into Chinese. It's called 战后日本政治的轨迹. Okay? 战后日本政治. And based on this new series, this is the harmony series between economic development and democracy, many scholars in China and foreign countries analyze the political and the economic development in China and give us some new theories. Okay? Now, for example, a very famous scholar in China, the Professor Yu Keping from the Peking University. He introduced a very important term, the concept, to describe the political development in China. This is the incremental democracy. He studied the political developments during the past decades in China. He emphasized again and again, many changes took place, many progress have been made in China towards the political development and the democracy. So he introduced this term, the incremental democracy. And also, Yu Keping organized a lot of the event to collect the cases. Right? This means representing this democratic development in China. So the Yu Keping set up a center, research center in Peking University, and collect a lot of famous cases about the democratic development in China. Right? So if you have interest, you may check the center and check the cases. And also, one of my students in Shanghai, now working in the Shanghai Politics School, analyzed these cases and published a very important paper. So this means many scholars, many students study the democratic development in China and collect a lot of cases. Now here I just mention some key points. And also, there are some foreign scholars studying democratic development in China. For example, a very famous scholar, Susan Ogden. Several years ago, so I met her in Fudan campus, and I invited her to give us a lecture in Fudan University. And Susan Ogden is a professor in Northwest University in the United States. Studied in China, studied Chinese politics, and he published a very interesting book. It's called The Inklings of the Democracy in China. The Inkling of democracy in China. He says that China is moving at a fair pace along the continuum from a totalitarian to a democratizing regime. Okay? So based on her analysis of the Chinese political development, of course there are more and more democratic elements in Chinese politics, in the political process in China. Okay? Now, based on all this analysis, based on this harmony series, so I try to develop a new series about the Chinese politics, about the political development in China. Okay? So this is called the theory of developmental democracy. Developmental. So it's a very important new concept compared to studies. So if you have interest, you may check my paper. Okay, but not in the paper on the intra-party democracy. So I have another paper. So you may check. Okay. Now, based on my research, I think the developmental democracy is an essential characteristic of the political development in contemporary China. And in the political series, the developmental democracy has two distinct and different meanings. One is regarded as a political form in which political participation is encouraged, civic virtues are emphasized, and the public works is promoted. Another one stresses that the two goals of the democratization and the economic development can be reconciled and should be promoted simultaneously. So this is what I want to emphasize in my paper and in my lecture. So that means from the very beginning of the Chinese reform, Communist Party and the Chinese government have to pursue these two different goals, the fundamental goal. One is economic development, but because we have to improve the living standards for the ordinary citizens in China. after the end of the Cultural Revolution, so many people in China live in very, very terrible poverty. So we have to develop the economy. So of course, the development must be placed on the priority. First of all, and second, so after the Chinese people and the Communist Party experienced the terrible Cultural Revolution and the personal dictatorship, of course, and also we are facing a totally new, different international situation. So after China opened its door to the Western countries, we have to develop democracy in China at the same time. So that means from the very beginning, from the late 1970s and the early 1980s, China introduced a lot of the political reform, the political measure to develop democracy in China. Okay? So that means that we have to pursue these two goals of the democratization and the economic development. And also we think we can reconcile these two different goals. Okay? So by combining the theory of the development democracy and the Chinese way of political and economic development, so we can outline the salient feature of China's political reform as follows. This means I try to define the development democracy in China. So I may give you some different points. For example, the first, the China's political reform is designed to combine the democratization and democracy. And second, in China's reform, we try to build a political system for development. Of course, development is a very important goal. And the third one, so we have to improve the form of government based on development. For example, if we want to develop democracy, well, we have to mobilize a lot of resources. If no development, well, we cannot mobilize more resources. So that means we can use these new resources to improve the political process. That means we can reform forms of government. And the next one, promoting the socialist democracy with the Chinese characteristic, along with the process of democracy. Okay. For a long time, we uphold the Deng Xiaoping's theory, Deng Xiaoping's principle. This means pursuing these two different goals. Deng Xiaoping emphasized again and again in the beginning of the Chinese reform. So we pursue the goals of economic development, and at the same time we have to reform our political system and develop democracy. So here I said the Chinese leaders, for example, Deng Xiaoping, adopted a new paradigm of democracy after reflection on the experience and lessons under the communist leadership. So the China's developmental democracy theory emphasizes that democratic development must be based on national conditions, and the Western model of democracy cannot be simply copied to China. So this means we have to some new understanding of the politics and democracy in China. So simply speaking, so in China we have to develop democracy under the leadership of the Communist Party. So this maybe is called the single party democracy. So if you have interest, you may read my paper on the intro party democracy. So the Communist Party is a huge organization. So how can we govern this organization? So we have to introduce a lot of rules. Of course, the one important rule is the democracy. Of course, in China, the formal and official rule is the so-called democratic centralism. So that means we try to maintain balance between centralization and decentralization. We have to maintain the balance between the authority and the democracy. Okay. So if you have interest in my theory, so you may read more on this topic. So here I mention some famous scholars' name and their basic point. That's the point. Okay? Now, for example, a very famous political scientist, Philip Schmitter and Terry Lin Carl, published a paper in which they emphasize that democracy is not a Western pattern and also has more than one model. Of course, we have our own understanding of democracy, and also we will have our own model of the democracy based on our experience, based on our understanding. Okay. And second, the very famous scholar from Yale University, Robert Dahl, he said democracy is a form of government consists of many complex and interdependent institutions. What's democracy? So of course, democracy consists of so many different institutions. So that means we may establish many different institutions, democratic institutions, one by one, piece by piece. Okay. So I'll talk about the development later, especially the electoral reform. So on. Okay. So in my research, I introduced a very special concept. I said it's the institutional accumulation. This means we may introduce reform and establish some democratic institution one by one, piece by piece, and then we made some substantial progress towards democracy. Okay. And another one, this Lawrence Whitehead. Lawrence, a very famous scholar from Oxford University. He studied democratization. He said that democratization is a long-term, complex, dynamic process of the social construction. And also, another scholar, Richard Scull, he said democracy is a developing idea. So that means my basic idea, based on so many different research. So if you want to follow my ideas and study my research, so you should read such kind of paper. Okay, so on and so forth. Well, quite interesting, I think. That means we have to some new concept, new theories to understand development in China. So based on this new understanding, this new theories, so I try to summarize the institutional accumulation in China toward the democracy or democratic development. Now here I said many democratic institutions have been accumulated in the development of socialist democracy with Chinese characteristics. Now, for example, the higher level of the electoral democracy. Now, from the very beginning of the Chinese reform, so we introduced, first, just now I emphasized, we re-established the People's Congress system in China, the central and the local level. This means the People's Congress plays a more and more important role in the decision-making process in China. And also, the People's Congress and their leaders became more and more important in the public affairs in China. We, in order to re-establish and strengthen the People's Congress system, we have to reform the electoral system. It doesn't mean from the very beginning of the Chinese reform, we introduced a lot of reform about the election. Now in China, so we implemented the elections at a different level, and the direct election at the local level, and the indirect election at the provincial and the central level. Right? In order to ensure the election be free and fair, we introduced a lot of reforms. We adopted a new law about election, and we try to improve the election process. Okay. So this is the so-called the higher level of the electoral democracy. And also in China, we introduced some very special institutional design. For example, the so-called two-ballot system, the public recommending candidate and the direct election system, so on and so forth. Right? So, we encourage the local political innovation. So many local leaders try to introduce some very special local reforms to improve the political process. Okay. This is the first one. And the second, the introduction of the deliberative democracy. So we introduced this term, this theory, and also in China, many systems have been established based on this idea. Now, for example, there are many different, for example, the Democratic Forum, the Citizen Assessment Meeting, the representative meeting of the resident, and the representative meeting of the villager. Many scholars conducted such a research based on their field study, case study. So if you have interest, you may check so many research books and research articles. So in China, there are many famous cases about the so-called deliberative democracy. That means we encourage more participation in decision making about the public affairs. So even in China, of course, we have to uphold the very important principle, Communist Party leadership. But at the same time, we have to encourage the public accountability in local affairs, local public affairs. So this means we encourage more public participation in the process of the decision making at local level, so on and so forth. Okay. And the third one, development of the grassroots democracy. This means we introduce the direct election for village committee and the neighborhood committee. And also, we encourage the more discussion and more participation at the local level. In rural areas, from late 1980s, we implemented the new law and encouraged the direct election on the village committee. And from late 1990s, we implemented a new law and introduced the direct election for neighborhood committee in the urban area. So many scholars who are interested in such kind of things and have already conducted the field study and published a lot. So this is the development of the grassroots demand. Okay. And the fourth one, the intra-party demand. This is what I emphasized in my paper, the intra-party demand. Now, for example, we completing the party's representative system and the party's committee system, expanding the public participation and improving the transparency in the decision making, and the reform and improve the intra-party election system. Just like I said, the Communist Party is a huge organization. The membership in Communist Party is huge. It's larger than the population in many other countries. I think the membership in Communist Party is larger than the population in all European countries. So how can we manage and govern this huge organization? It's a terrible task. So we have, of course, we have to establish some kind of rules. Of course, one of the important rules is democracy. So we have to guarantee all the party members can express themselves. And we must guarantee all the important decisions have been made based on the participation and discussion, so on and so forth. So that means we have to establish some kind of the democratic system. We have to introduce some kind of rules, because we have terrible lessons from the past. For example, during the 1950s and 1960s. So we really, so many people suffered a lot during the political movement. So for example, during 1950s and 1960s, especially during the period of the Cultural Revolution. Because of the personal dictatorship of the Mao Zedong, so many high-level party leaders were put into prison without any so this is the terrible lesson for. Of course, from the very beginning, Deng Xiaoping and also some other communist leaders, so again and again, so we have to develop democracy within Communist Party. I think in order to protect ourselves. If no such kind of system, every party leader will have great risk. Just like in the Cultural Revolution. So this means during the past decade, from the very beginning of the reform, the Communist Party tried to improve its intra-party government. The one important direction is democracy. So we have to guarantee, we have to protect the basic right for many communist leaders and the communist members. Of course, just like we have to protect the basic rights for every citizen in China. So during the past decades, we introduced a lot of reform within the Communist Party. So now, the study of the intra-party democracy in China is a very important topic. So last week, I got a new book on this topic. So if you have interest, you may study this one. Well, I think this is a very important topic, very interesting topic, especially for foreign school. In foreign countries, especially in Western countries, because of the fundamental difference between the political system in China and the foreign country, so it's really difficult for foreign scholars to understand the development of the intra-party democracy in China. So if you have interest, you may check again my paper on this topic. And so based on the post-reform and now the China entered a new period. So, after the Xi Jinping came to power, so we tried to implement some new reform to strengthen the party leadership, and of course, at the same time, to improve the rule of law, and at the same time, promote democracy. So we try to combine the three key points. Usually we say the communist leadership, the people's democracy, and the rule of law combined together. So this is the key point if you want to understand the current situation in Chinese politics and the Chinese political system today. Okay. So very important new development so in Chinese politics under the leadership of Xi Jinping is that we try to strengthen party's leadership and try to exercise the so-called overall leadership. This means the Communist Party played a very important role in Chinese politics. At the same time, we have to develop the Chinese democracy. This means the Communist Party exercise leadership based on the rule of the law, and also based on the people's democracy. This means we have to combine together. In the basic understanding for many foreign countries, for many foreign scholars. So you may find just like I introduced a very famous scholar, Min Xinpei, right? The leading scholar, the Chinese scholar in the United States. He said the communist democracy is the oxymoron. So this is the new fact in China. So just now I said, the Communist Party is a huge organization in China today, exercising the overall leadership. So how can we manage and govern this huge organization? So we have to develop some new rule based on the rule of law and the democracy. So now Xi Jinping has called for the overall leadership of the Communist Party in all areas, all sectors. Now, so here I may give you some very, very basic points about this new development. This so-called under the leadership of Xi Jinping. The first one, establishing a central leading group or commission for deepening overall reform. Of course, under the leadership of Xi Jinping. So now this new commission adopts most of the important decisions for China's development. Okay? And the second, revitalizing and reinventing the structure and the function of the leading party group in the state apparatus, state-owned enterprises, and the social organization. So this is another very, very important system in China. So this system very important for the Communist Party to exercise leadership on all the state affairs. So that means in many state apparatus, including the state-owned enterprises, the Communist Party established a very important key group. Exercise leadership. Just now I said the Communist Party has a huge membership, right? So that means in almost all the state apparatus and the state-owned enterprises, and also including the social organization, there must be the Communist member. And then the Communist members formed this key group. And we established this command system. So this key group report to the Communist Party committee and discuss some detail, and then make decision. So this the second new development about the leading party group, right? And the third one, the strengthen the leadership of Xi Jinping as a party's core leader. In Chinese we say 核心. So in China, the central leadership is very important. Now first we have to ensure the party leadership is first legitimate, and then efficient, and then centralized. So based on the past lessons, I think this Communist Party tried to emphasize the Xi Jinping as a new core leader. But this is some new development. So just like his two predecessors, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, she is the central secretary, the general secretary of the party, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and the head of the state. So the general secretary of the Communist Party, so it's the head of state, chairman in China, and at the same time, he's the chairman of the military commission. So this means the supreme leader. Okay. So of course, this also indicates the interrectorate between the party and the state. Okay. The Xi Jinping has now been accepted and confirmed as a core leader of the Communist Party in 2016. And the fourth one, the deepening reform of the party and the state institutions so as to establish a party and state institutional function system that's well conceived, fully built, procedure based, and efficiently functioning. So now we introduce a lot of reforms to ensure the party, Communist Party, and the state organ work together closely. So this is some new development in China. After we introduce so many new development, new reform, and there are some debates and discussion about this new reform and the new direction in Chinese politics. Many people say Xi Jinping became more and more authoritarian. And also, at the same time, many scholars praise Xi Jinping revitalized the communist great tradition. For example, democratic centralism and mass line tradition. So that means some people go to the leftist, some people go to the rightist. give comment on this new development. Okay, I said I also welcome any comment on this new development. So here I want to talk about my personal opinion on this new development. Okay? So after experiencing the trial and error, so I think the Communist Party has successfully established itself as a central leading force in Chinese politics and contributed greatly to the rapid rise of China during the past decade. So this is what I try to emphasize. This is what I want to talk about, the true secret of China's development mirror. Especially, the Communist Party with Xi Jinping as a core leader has now been exercised overall leadership at all different areas. So this is a new form of governance. Here I created a new term to describe the new development. This is called the party-centered governance. Since the Communist Party has been playing a central role in the governance of China, the party-centered governance has now emerged as a new pattern of the governance from comparative perspective. From the comparative perspective, we may talk about many different forms of governance. For example, the state-centered governance, the society-centered governance, or the military-centered governance, or the religion-centered governance, so on and so forth. But in China, of course, the party is the dominant rule. Played the most important role in almost all the public affairs. So I think this is a very special party-centered government. And at the same time, so many people may say one party dominant, is authoritarian or totalitarian or the dictatorship. But I said no. Why? Because the Communist Party exercises its leadership based on the rule of law and also follow the very important rule of the people's democracy. So here I use another very important term to describe the Chinese politics. Okay, so this is my term. Okay, it's my concept. I use it to describe the Chinese politics, the Chinese political development. So I said the holy trinity in Chinese politics. Holy trinity in Chinese politics. Okay. While the Communist Party exercises the overall leadership and plays central role in the governance of China, the party has embedded itself into the state structure and exercises overall leadership within the constitutional framework of the state, thus consolidating the institutional foundation and strengthening legal guarantee for the communist leadership. So therefore, the party-centered governance is a golden combination of the communist leadership, the people's democracy, and rule of law, which perhaps will present a new type of the institutional or the political civilization in the future. So very special, right? Very special. So I think if you use the Western conventional wisdom in political science, so you may say the Chinese system is ridiculous. But if we say China from a very different perspective, you may find the Chinese system is very good, it's efficient. And at the same time, more importantly, the Chinese system has been supported and accepted by the Chinese people. And this is important. During the past several decades, from the late 20th century, the political scientists in many countries conducted the surveys on public opinion, on government, on political parties. Do you know the very basic result? No. During the past 20 years, more and more people, especially in Western countries, including Japan, and also including in South Korea, we may find the very, very low level of the support in the government, in political leaders, in political party, in the National Assembly. Okay. But in China, so I think many of scholars and students know a very, very basic fact. That during the past 20 years, the scholars conducted a survey in China. More and more survey results indicated that most of the Chinese people support the Chinese government, supporting the communist leadership. Okay. So this is an amazing story in our political research. Until today, there's no any political theory that can explain this puzzle. So I invite all our students to do research on that. And then if you have some new explanations, and you can publish a very, very high level, high quality. Okay. So I think the time is limited, so I have to stop here and welcome any comments and questions. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Guo Dingting. This is Myung-Nim from Yonsei. Okay, I think there are several questions from Korean student or Chinese student here.
Okay, question from Yonsei?
Yeah. There are many questions from here.
Oh, many questions. Good. So, one by one, please.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, no problem.
Thank you for the lecture, and I just want to know about the grassroots democracy that you mentioned in your paper or the lecture. And I think it's very important for China's democracy development, and indeed, it included the election of People's Congressman or People's Congressman, and I indeed participated one voting of People's Congressman in 2016. I found that our people are so less aware of their rights to do this vote, and they did not participate in the debate. So I don't think this system work very well. So do you think that our government intends to make people less aware of our rights, or to realize this democracy, or just people themselves do not care about their rights? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think you have mentioned two questions. The one is about the grassroots level democracy. In the rural areas and the urban areas, during the past decades, we introduced a lot of reform and tried to encourage more participation by the ordinary citizens. I think in this direction, we have already made substantial progress. And now we have already established a very basic system for the grassroots democracies. And also we encourage more participations by the ordinary citizens in the local public affairs. Based on my knowledge, for example, in Shanghai, many scholars studied different cases which indicated that this new reforms, this new grassroots democracy work quite well, I think. That means many local ordinary citizens participate in this process and can contribute very much to the improvement of the local affairs. And another question is about the People's Congress at the local level, right? So indeed, we also find some problems in this process, but I want to emphasize that in China, the People's Congress is not the, for example, the parliament in the Western style. Okay, that means so in China, the People's Congress plays its role in quite different way. Now, for example, so if you want to study, for example, the People's Congress at the local level, especially at the county level, so you should study, for example, the behavior of the congressman, we say the representative, and also you should study the relation between the People's Congress and the local government. For example, the different government officials, they work together to make some decisions and including, for example, attract the investments, so on and so forth. Okay, so you know this is a very special network. So our People's Congress work together with the government to contribute to the local development. Okay? So this means the People's Congress plays a quite different role from the Western country. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So the voting, just now you mentioned the voting behavior. Okay. The voting is not quite important in China.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Well, maybe
Can
one
you
question
hear me?
from Fudan campus.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay. Yongse again.
First of all, thank you for your presentation.
Speak aloud.
And can you hear my voice now?
Okay, no problem. Please.
Okay. And I want to ask, how do we understand the Chinese incremental democracy, and what methods have been adopted to achieve incremental democracy?
Okay. Incremental democracy means we made some progress toward democracy day by day, piece by piece. Right? So that means during the past decades, we introduced a lot of political reforms to develop democracy and have already made some substantial progress. Just now I mentioned in my lecture, for example, the higher level of the electoral democracy, the People's Congress plays more and more important roles and contributes to the public affairs at different levels, and also there are more intra-party democracy within Communist Party, so on and so forth. So if you have interest, you may check some research and find many different case studies on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. Any questions? One question from Fudan campus. Who will be first? Cameron.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned at the end the implications for China's democratic future, the sort of expansion of inter-party democracy. Does the PRC, does the CCP have like a sort of end goal or target for inter-party democracy, such as nationwide inter-party elections, or a certain level that they're trying to attain, or are they just essentially making up reforms as they go along?
the intra-party democracy in China is very important. And during the past years, we have already established some basic systems for the intra-party democracies. And also we are discussing some new possible measures to expand the intra-party democracy. For example, let the parties Congress, National Congress, and also parties Congress at the local level play more regular, more important roles. So that means this parties Congress can discuss the important matters with local, for example, local government leaders and many other the local leaders, and then work together. Just now I mentioned the Communist Party is the ruling party in China. So that means the party Congress and the party committee have to work together very closely with some other actors. For example, the government leaders or the political consultative members and so on and so forth. So that means we have to work together. Now, the party Congress have meeting every 5 years. Okay? And one possible direction is that the party Congress at the central level and the local level will have some more meetings, and in which they can discuss the important matters about the local development and the national development. This is just one case, one example. Okay, any other questions? So how about the Keio University? If no, one more question from the campus. Please, use the microphone, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor, for your presentation. As you mentioned
Okay,
before,
thank you.
I understand, in my understanding that in this communist leadership, as a single party democracy, is there any existence of different interest group within the party, and does these different group allowed to have different opinion in the party? Thank you.
So of course, in Chinese Communist Party, there are many different opinions. But in China, we try to promote the intra-party democracy. And in China, the Communist Party is the single ruling party. If we want to develop democracy in China, the intra-party democracy is very important. Now, in Communist Party, we introduced and implemented a very, very famous, very, very important principle is called democratic centralism. So and this principle and system is based on, for example, the public participation and the open discussion. So that means the communist leaders conducted a lot of survey, conducted the field work, and listened to the opinions from the many different fields and our decisions. This means at different levels have to be based on such kind of public participation and open discussions. Okay. So of course there are many different opinions that we can discuss together. So many questions from here. One more question from Fudan campus. I said maybe this is the last question.
Maybe one comment.
Oh, okay. Comment,
Yes.
please.
And I'm a little pessimistic about Chinese political reform in democracy because, as my point of view, personally, I think that the Chinese democracy, the political reform is based on the opinion of Chinese leaders. And for example, if the leader don't want democracy and we don't have democracy, and if the leader wants democracy and we have some progress in democracy, and I said the pessimistic about democracy is not that I am pessimistic about Chinese politics because I have read a book about Chinese politics another way. It's not democracy, but a meritocracy. Do you heard of Osler? It's about the Daniel Bell, a scholar. It's a leader of our Shandong University in the School of Political Science, and I like him very much. And he said about another model of Chinese politics. And he said that we should more based on the merit, the personality of Chinese leaders, and not form a similar model as the West. That's my personal idea. Maybe it's more benefit to our art.
Okay, thank you very much. Daniel Bell is very famous and moved from the Tsinghua University to Shandong and tried to provide some new understanding of the Chinese politics. Especially, he emphasized this so-called meritocracy, right? I think if the meritocracy wants to work very well, it must include some democratic elements. If there's no any democratic elements in meritocracy, it doesn't work very well. Right? So that means that in the future, the Chinese democracy will be a mixture of many different systems. Of course, including some meritocracy, and also including the rule of law, and people's democracy, and some many different. So this maybe we can say this is some kind of the comparative advantage for Chinese development. So then we can study all different political experience, and we can learn from all different countries. We can then mix together. Okay, so combine together. So just now I say the Chinese system today basically is a holy trinity. The holy trinity tries to combine the three key concepts together. Okay, so I think this is a very basic point for us to understand in the current situation and the political development in today's China. Okay, so I think the time is up. We have to stop here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Gordon Ping. Okay, see you
Okay,
next
thank
week.
you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor.